Hey guys, what's up? This is Vinny Stevens here, and welcome to another video for my channel, and welcome to another album ranker video. So, in this video, we'll be ranking U2 albums, but there's a couple of things before I start. One, I'm only going to be ranking U2 studio albums only, so everything from Boy up to um, Songs of Experience. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm also going to be including the kind of half studio, half live hybrid album, Rattle and Hum. I'm not featuring any live albums like Under the Blood Red Sky or any EPs such as Free. So yeah, enough of me talking. Let's get on with the video. So coming in last place is Songs of Innocence. So this is the 13th studio album by the band. It was recorded from 2019 to 2014 and was released on the 9th of September of that year. It was produced by Danger Mouse, also called Brian Burden, with additional production from Paul Ebworth, Ryan Taylor, Declan Gaffney, and Flood, also known as Mark Ellis. The album was released to more than 500 million iTunes customers, which became the largest album release of all time by pretty much adding onto users' devices for free. This is the longest gap between albums, lasting 5.5 years, for a few reasons. One, Bono expressed about the band's ability to remain musically relevant. Two, several projects with different producers included a border compilation to the previous record called Sons of Ascent. And three, struggling to complete the album to the band's satisfaction, which delayed the release. The theme behind this album is the band members in the 1970s youth touching on childhood memories, loves and losses, which while playing musical tribute to musical inspirations such as the Ramones and the Clash. Bono has described it as the most personal album the band have ever written. So my review on this album comes in last on this list. To be honest, I don't know what to think about it. I do have mixed opinions on it, but listening to it closely without kind of all the baggage of a controversial release strategy around the album, which overshadows it, it has got some decent songs on it, such as Miracle of Joey Ramone, Every Breaking Wave, and Song for Someone. These songs to me have a story to tell about the band's early years, as these songs lay down the members of the band's path into their past. This album's produced to me kind of has a very sonic venture into a powerful dissolution of what defines the band's sound. That once was familiar and brand new, but this album to me, it does lose its own way around halfway through. Though there is still good enough quality material. This is the first album I listened to by the band because, well, it was downloaded for free on iTunes, which I think it wasn't a great move at the time because, like, I wasn't a fan of the band. But to me, I don't really tend to listen to this album as much these days. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is No Line on Horizon. So this is the 12th studio album by the band. It was produced by Brian Eno, Daniel Londas and Steve Lillywhite. It was recorded from May 2007 to December 2008 and was released on the 27th of February 2009. It was the longest gap between albums to that point. The band originally intended to release it as two EPs, but later combined it into a single record. The band began work on the album in 2006 with producer Rick Rubin, but shelved most of the material from those sessions. The band in May 2007 began work with a new producer. They intended to write future hit songs that would be played forever. Having grown tired of writing the first person, Bono wrote the lyrics from the prospect of different characters, Recording took place at several studios in the US, UK, and Ireland. The band composed of 50 to 60 songs, which delayed the release to continue writing. The band wanted to do more experimental album than the previous two albums, and compared to the shifted style to that is seen on the Joshua Tree at Acton Baby. The band toured the U2 360 tour from 2009 to 2011. They set a record as one of the highest grossing concert tours of all time, sold $736 million in ticket sales. So my review on it, this album, again, I'm not too sure what to think about it. I do again have kind of mixed opinions on it. This album, to me, feels like it's a bit of an experimental album, like 1991's Acton Baby. It said it sounds more like a pale, weaker version of the band's efforts. The album, it does achieve a rare feat of sounding like they are trying too hard, but not hard enough at the same time. I know the band have done more over the years to put in increasingly painstaking methods into their production and lively spells they have in the studio on this album, but I do feel like the band were tempted to go back to basic sessions with the likes of The Edge's guitar licks, Bird Beneath a Hazy Phase, and most electric drumming from Larry Mullen Jr. On the positive on this album, you do hear the band Bird with Deep Within. This does have the lyrics and melodies adhere to some standard U2 arena ready formulas. Like this album, to me, I don't really listen to because there's no songs on this album that really jump out at me. It's the same with the last album, and I think I only ever really listened to this album more than once. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Pop. So this is the ninth studio album by the band. It was produced by Flood, Harley B and Steve Osborne. It was recorded from 1995 to 1996 and was released on the 3rd of March of 1997. The album was a continuation of the band's 1990s musical reinvention as they incorporated alternative rock, techno, dance and electronica influences into their sound. This album employed a variety of production techniques that were relatively new to U2, including sampling, loops, programmed drum machines and sequencing. At the time, drummer Larry Mullen Jr. was inactive due to a back injury, promoting the other band members to take a different approach to songwriting. After Mullen returned to the band, they reworked much of the material, but struggled to complete songs. After the band booked their upcoming 1997 Pop Mart tour before the record was completed, they felt rushed into delivering it, delaying the album's release date from late 1996 to 1997, but the band ran out of time in the studio working up to the last minute to complete songs. The finished product was not liked by the band, and they recorded and remixed many of the songs for singles and compilation album releases. The time required to complete the album cut time for the band to rehearse for the tour, which affected the quality of internal shows. So my review on this album to me, I'm a bit meh on it. It's not a bad album, but as a fan, it does deal with the burdens of expectation to sound a certain way at the time of the release of this album. I think this album is building on the success of the previous two albums, and even before that, the band did grapple on a completely different set of expectations. On this album, the band, for me, did push a bit more electronic attire from their previous two albums to its limit. In doing so, I do feel like they veered wildly off course and managed to confound expectations of that time. Like, this album had the best producers of the year, and it's clear to me it's just got too much protection techniques behind it that may have been used to push the band more away from the original signature sides, with the likes of using tossing and drum loops and unrecognisable guitar disc rotations that fail to obscure the fact that the band for me, the songwriting on this album was all time low, but it just feels like the album is rushed. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is October. So this is the second studio album by the band. It was recorded from April 1981, July to August of 1981, and was released on the 12th of October of that year. It was produced by Stevie Lillywhite. The album was lyrically inspired by the Bono, The Edge, and Larry Mullen Jr. after joining a Christian book called the Shalom Fellowship, and it contained spiritual and religious themes. The involvement with that group questioned the relationship between the Christian faith and the rock and roll lifestyle, and this threatened to break up the band. After completing the Boy Tour in February 1981, U2 began to write new material, entering the recording studio in July of 1981. The band recorded at Wilma Lane Studios. The recording sessions were complicated by Bonner's loss of his briefcase containing the progress lyrics for new songs, forcing a hurled improvisational approach to complete the album on time. So my review on this album: to me, this is a good rock and roll album, but it does feel like it is 2 steps forward, 2 steps behind at the same time. It does feel like this album was rushed to deliver follow-up to their debut. By this album, it relied more on instinct and feeling rather than talent or craft, offering a set of songs that sound a bit like a draft or two away from perfection. This album, it's not uncommon for several more effects to do fall short of the band's debut. This album's finished product does feel like a Boy Part 2 rather than a true follow-up album. The only song that really stands out for me on this album I would consider is the classic that I consider as a classic was Gloria. It's a decent song. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Boy. So this is the debut studio album by the band. It was recorded in July to September of 1980 and was released on the 20th of October of that year. It was produced by Stevie Lillywhite. This album contains songs from the band's 40-song repertoire, and at the time included 2 tracks that were re-recorded from the original versions of the group's debut release, the EP3. The album was recorded in Wilma Lane Studios in Dublin and was released by Island Records. This album used an unorthodox production techniques such as recorded drumming in the stairwell and recorded smash bottles and forks played against bike wheel. The albums reflect on the adolescence, innocence, and the passage into adulthood. So my review on this album, this album is a good album. To me, this album was what the band have been known for and what exactly they are. Taking most of the songs from this album, put them together with the songs from their 2014 album, and they might as well be on the same album. On this album, you can hear the elements of their side locked into place with from the very beginning. This album had the raw U2 sound, and their sonics were spot on throughout this album. The songwriting still had a bit of way to go, but the only downside to this album is the band tends to find a single groove in each song and ride it into oblivion. This album remains compelling because of the ambitions cut deep into every groove. The songs in this album I would consider as band classics, and the have stand out for me. It would be I Will Follow and Electric Co. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Songs of Experience. So this is the 14th and current studio album. It was recorded from 2019 to 2014. It was released on the 1st of December of that year. It was produced by Jacnov Lee, if I've said his name right, and Ryan Tanner, with Andy Barlow, Jolie Thomas, Brent Kurza, Paul Edworth, Ginger Mouse, and Declan Gaffney. It was recorded at various studios, and that this album was intended to be confirmation piece to U2's previous record, 2014 Song of Innocence, wherever its predecessor explored the group's members' indulgence in Ireland in the 1970s. Songs of this experience, periodically, is a collection of letters written by Bono to people and places closest to his heart. This album featured guest appearances from several musical acts, including Ham, Countdown Limmer, and Lady Gaga. This album was the first convinced during the Songs of Innocence sessions, with Bono writing songs while recuperated from a serious bike accident. U2 began work on this album during the 2015 Innocence Experience tour, with the band members individually collaborating with the producers while on the road. The sessions were done by 2016, wrapped up by the end of the year, with the album being delayed due to the shift in global politics and the conservative directions such as the UK Brexit referendum and the 2016 US presidential election. They chose to put it on hold and re-record many of the songs as the group, while remixing and exploring different production techniques. Bono rewrote the lyrics to reflect the political climate, as well as a brush with mortality that was experienced in late 2016. This album was finished during the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary tour in 2017. So my review, this album is a big improvement from their last one. I'm glad the band scrapped their original plans for a sequel. Instead, they restructured it as meditation on mortality and love. This album is slighted with almost 4 decades of baggage, as the band and this album try to stay born while honoring to past victories. Some of its work does have its general uplift on several songs that were made for arenas and stadiums, but the overall tone is one description. The band tried to stay relevant in a world that is moving on. Some good songs of this album, like You're the Best Fight About Me, Get Out of Your Own Way, Love is Bigger Than Anything in Its Way, and Summer of Love, as well as some of the underrated songs I think are like Blackout and Lights of Home. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Rattle and Hum. This album is a live slash studio album by the band. It was recorded from 1987 to 88 and was released on the 12th of October of that year. It was produced by Jimmy Irvine. Following the breakthrough success of the band's previous album, the Rattle and Hum project captured their continued experience with American roots music, following incorporated elements of blues rock, folk rock, and gospel music into their sound. The album has got a collection of new studio tracks, live performances, and cover songs. The project included recordings at Sun Studios in Memphis and the collaborations with Bob Dylan and B.B. King and the Harlem New Voices of Freedom Gospel Choir. Although this album was to represent the band paying tribute to rock legends, but some critics accused the band of trying to place themselves among the ranks of these artists. It's my review on this album. This album, it is a good album. I think this album did come up the ever-growing impact of the late 80s pop culture and how the band aimed their sights towards American blues and soul music. This album has got powerful influence on their songwriting and their inspirations, but at the same time it's got a political message to it. I love how this album is a hybrid of a live and studio album, something I've never heard before. It's got some great songs on it such as Desire, Huckman 269, Angel of Harlem, Heartland, and God Part 2, as well as a collaboration with B.B. King on When Love Came to Town. The live performances emphasise the band's humor, feels, self-awareness, like they brought into their own hype to it. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. So this is the 11th studio album by the band. It was recorded from February 2003 to July 2018. 2004. It was released on the 22nd of November of that year. It was produced by Stevie Lillywhite with additional production from Chris Thomas, Jack Val Lee, Neil Hooper, Flood, Daniel Lundis, Brian Eno, and Carl Gladsfield. Much like their previous album, that record exhibits a more mainstream rock side of their band's experimental with the alternative rock and dance music in the 1990s. Look at that more hard-headed side of previous albums. After 9 months of work, the band had enough material ready to release, but were not satisfied with the results. The band spent another 6 months reworking songs and encouraging better performances. This album touches on life, death, love, war, fear, and family. My review on this album I would consider a rock record. The album strips away much of its artifact around the band sound and brings the edge hooks straight to the front, shows off his talent as a guitarist. The sound on this album is catchier than ever in a way occasionally reclaimed to REM's similar departure on their 1994 album. I love how the album's opener, Vertigo, it's such a U2 classic U2 song in which the band may probably never see again in the era of YouTube and streaming services such as Spotify. This album, to me, has a powerful sound to it, and I think there's no weak songs, but the album as a whole is greater that sums up of its part. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is War. So this is the third studio album by the band. It was recorded from September to November of 1982 and was released on the 20th of February 1983. It was produced by Stevie Lillywhite. This album is regarded as the band's first overly political album with songs like Sunny Bloody Sunday and New Year's Day, as well as the title, which stems from the band's interpretation of the world at the time. While the central themes of the band's previous album was indulgence and spirituality, Revelry, this album focuses on both the physical aspects of warfare and the emotional after effects. Musically, it is also harsher than the band's previous releases. The album has been described as the record where the band turned professionalism itself into a crusade. My review on this album is by far the band's stringent and powerful album. I would consider this album as their breakthrough album. This album, to me, it is considered as their first political album, which usually I don't like those type of albums. This album, the band developed their signature sound, which the band has been well known for. On this album, I do feel like Bono, with the lyrics, took the aim of a more personal and universal approach, but it covers a world torn asunder by conflict, which was different for the band. But the band on this album, for me, it has been known to have the musical chemistry approach to it. But this album, you can hear the band tightening their grooves, building up their licks into arena ready powerhouse. Songs I love from this album, I would consider like kind of classics, would be Sunday Bloody Sunday, New Year's Day, and 40. Anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Zooropa. So this is the 8th studio album by the band. It was recorded from February to May 1984. Was released 93. It was released on the 5th of July of that year. It was produced by Flood, Brian Eno, and The Edge. The album was inspired by the band's experiences during the Zoo TV tour. This album expanded on many of the tour themes of technology and media oversatisfaction. The record was a continuation of the group's experimentation with alternative rock, electric dance music, electrical dance, and electrical sound effects that began with their previous album. The band began to write and record the album during the 6 months break between legs of the Zoo TV tour. The record was originally intended as an EP to promote the Zooropa leg of the tour. that began in May 1993, but during the sessions the group decided to extend the record to a full-length album. The band wrote this album and recorded at a rapid pace, with songs originated with many sources including leftover material from the last album sessions. The album was not completed at the time for the tour resuming, forcing the band to travel between Dublin and the tour destination to complete mix of the touring. My review: this album is a good album compared to its previous album. I think while the previous album was fancy, explosive, desperate night out of the time, this album is more disjointed, disturbed, and suspicious the morning after. This album and even the ZTV tour did to me have the same ideas employed for satire and tour tapping, suddenly being haunted and frightening. I love how this album uses audio from TV and radio and even from other outlets. Saw other album songs faded in and out behind the music. To me, I'm glad this album wasn't an EP and it did come out as an album, as it is one of the band's best albums. Even what they were doing at the time, only then could manage to pull it off, and as a result it hangs together as a powerful statement. Even the songs and style reflects that, with the fast and loose approach recording. This album has grown on me, and the more I listen to it sounds better each time. The only downside to it, to me, it is a bit disco and techno, and it is at the point the band started to move away from the original side. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is The Unforgettable Fire. So this is the fourth studio album by the band. It was recorded from the 7th of May to 5th of August 1984. It was released on the 1st of October of that year. It was produced by Brian Eno and Daniel Londos. The band wanted to pursue a musical direction following their hard-hitting rock album of the sound of their previous album. On this album, they experimented with a more ambient sound. The results changed the direction. Was at the time their most dramatic. So my review of this album, the album, I would consider it as a build-up of what was to come. This album, to me, the band sort out as a renovation and as an evolution in their signature sound. This album is an early classic for the band, like War, which I would consider kind of their breakthrough album. This album, it's got a great production team behind it that marries the atmosphere studio sound with the band's slight straight ahead rock approach. The band continued down the route of a more political path, but of a more tempered, spiritual, redeeming attitude, with the Edge's ringing guitar opening is one of the most iconic riffs of the band. The songs I would consider as classics for the band is Pride in the Name of Love, which is no more equivalent a song which exists to remain us to truly raise up, but what we must prepare to fall. Other songs such as Unforgettable Fire, Sort of Homecoming, good songs. Other songs I would consider alright would be 4th of July, Bad, Elvis Presley, and America, and MLK. I've done a full vinyl review on this album where I go deeper about this album. You could go and check that out. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is All That You Can Leave Behind. So this is the 10th studio album by the band. It was recorded from 1998 to 2000. It was released on the 30th of October that year. It's actually nearly coming up from the time I recorded this album, 20 years. It was produced by Brian Eno and Daniel Londos, following the band's experimentation with alternative rock and dance music in the 90s, and the band returned for more mainstream sound for this album. The record was originally named U2000, which was a working title for them during the Pop Art tour, This album, the band wanted to return to sort of arrangements that considered almost entirely of guitar and drums, and to quickly regroup in the studio after the Pop Mart tour. So my review on this album for me is kind of like back to basic approach, coupled with all the ticks that the band have taken on all over the years with the studio experimentation, and brought out this masterpiece of an album, which once again redefines the band. This album over the past, while it has grown on me, I underestimated how brilliant this album was. It was a hit machine for the band. It got songs that the modern classics like Beautiful Day, Stuck in the Moment You Can't Get Out of, Walk On, and Elevation. Even though these four songs at the start of the album, at the start of the album, but it has less depth, but the rest of the songs are decent enough. So anyway, on to the next album. So the next album is Acton Baby. So this is the seventh studio album by the band. It was recorded in October 1990 to September 1991 and was released on the 18th of November of that year. It was produced by Daniel Londos and Brian Eno. Stunned by criticism of the previous release, the band shifted the musical direction to incorporate influence from alternative rock, industrial music, and electronic dance music into their sound. The theme behind this album is darker, more introspective, and at times more flamboyant than previous work. The album and the subsequent multimedia inclusive Zoo TV tour was essential to the band's 1990 reinvention, by which they abandoned their earnest public image for a more light-hearted and self-deprecating one. This album's inspiration from the German reunification and during the sessions that were fought with conflict, as the band had disagreements over the musical direction and the quality of their music. The tension and show progress nearly caused the band to disband. My review, this album is a brilliant album. This album has grown on me so much that I don't think where I first listened to it, it would have made a number 2 position on this list. It is hard to think that many bands that could reinvent their sound with such a critical commercial success as the band did here. The only one I could think of is probably Bon Jovi. This album leads the band into the 90s with larger sales, bigger concert venues, even at that time. The album gives the band a fresh new approach by beating their heads together. The songs I love from this album is Zoo Station, great opener, followed by Even the Better The Real Thing, Ballad 1, Until the End of the World, The Fly, and Mysterious Ways. I think an underrated song I love is Who's Going to Ride Your Wild Horses, and the rest of the songs like So Cruel, Ultraviolet, Light My Way, and Akbat. I don't think there is one bad song on this album. I would love if they did like what they did with the Joshua Tree 30th anniversary, do a tour by play the album in full, like another Zoo TV tours. I have heard rumours it is being considered, but I don't know. Might have to wait and see next year. So anyway, on to the next album. So coming in at number 1 is the Joshua Tree. This is the 5th studio album by the band. It was produced by Brian Londos and Brian Eno. It was recorded from January 1986 to January 1987, was released on the 9th of March of that year. It was produced by Daniel Londos and Brian Eno. In contrast to their abundant experimentation of their 1984 release, the band aimed for a more hard-hitting sound with limitations of controversial song structures. The album is influenced by American rock and Irish roots music through pseudo-political concise lyrics embellished with spiritual imagery. It consists of the group It consists of the group Empathy for Real America with their fascination with the mythical America. A lot of this album was inspired by American experience, literature, and politics, which at the time, which chose the band to pick the US as it as its theme for this album. So my review on this album to me is a quintessential album for the band. This album has it all. It's got the Edge's riffs are massive and they're iconic. It's got the foundations which a lot of alternative bands from the 80s onwards has built on. The lyrics on this album, Bono blends the political and personal in a way that elevates both relevated some of the Western culture's greatest triumphs and the tragedies to daily life, and the process of conveying equal proportions of hope and rage. Both Larry Mullen Jr. and Adam Clayton do lay those some thundering and towering rhythms that propose on the songs. There are some classic songs on this album, such as Where the Streets Have Got No Name, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For, With or Without You, and songs that have grown on me, like Built in the Sky and God in God's Country. This album is the band's finest at the highest point in rock in the 80s. I've got this album on vinyl. I have done a vinyl review on it. You could go and check it out. And I've actually seen the band perform this album in full on their 2017 30th anniversary tour at Twickenham Stadium in London. Probably one of my best concerts I've ever been to. So, but yeah, anyway, I am going to wrap this video up. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel and hit the instant notifications bell in the description for more videos. So yeah, the next album review is going to be Bon Jovi, so stick around for that. I do apologise for kind of the lighting. I just haven't, somehow my camera's not picking up the light properly. I have just decided to move back down into my living room to do these videos just for the meantime. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I guess see ya.